Welcome to an introduction to RStudio. My name is Brian Cafferkey, and a little about myself. So I'm a data solutions consultant, also a Microsoft MVP. I have decades of IT experience. I'm the author of a Pro PowerShell for database developers. Also lead two technical user groups, the SQL Pass chapter, the Rhode Island Microsoft Business Intelligence user group, which meets at Bryant University in Rhode Island. Also lead the Southern New England user R group, or R user group, and that meets in Franklin, Massachusetts, typically. My Twitter handle is on the upper right-hand side, at Brian Cafferkey, and my email is brian256@msn.com. And of course, I'm doing a lot of YouTube training videos. I'm trying to get the word out, so please, I appreciate if you comment, help me, share, like, follow. It's great. I'm pretty steady stream of training videos, and I do move around a bit for different interests. I do a lot of PowerShell, doing a lot of data science now. So again, please help me get the word out. I just get really excited about this stuff. I love sharing it. Do have a little plug this month, which is I am leading a SQL Saturday, which is part of SQL Pass. That's a one-day technical training event related to all things SQL Server. But there's going to be a pre-conference day, a training day before that, and the money is all going to support the user groups. And the pre-con topic or workshop is called Data Science with R, A to Z workshop. So it's going to be a great hands-on, going to cover a lot of subjects, programming in R, how R works, what data science is, and predictive modeling, and how to do that with R, looking at visualizations. And we're going to look at some fun, interesting topics such as R integration with Power BI and how to call scripts and things like that and really get more out of Power BI. We're going to look at SQL Server integration with R. And the main focus there is that so Microsoft purchased a company that has an independent, really standalone R server, and it scales R up. It's a great product that allowed people previously to scale up their R applications so they could do bigger and bigger data and process more and do a lot more heavy-duty machine learning. Well, that's now integrated with SQL Server, and I'm going to be presenting on that as well. Also looking at using R with Azure Machine Learning Studio. So there's a lot of stuff there. So I'll be working with another professional, John Miner, whom I have immense respect for, who's been in the field for also a long time, a lot of experience and knowledge with just about everything on the data platform. So you can find that and register for that event, and please share this, get the word out, because it is, again, it's just to fund our user groups, but share, get the word out. It's at https://r_programming.eventbrite.com. So r_programming.eventbrite.com. If you forget it, you can Google it or go back to this, or go to the slides, which I'll show you where to get the slides in a minute. And when you do that, it's only $150, but you can even get it for less money because we're going to be giving a 20% discount to anybody who uses the discount code Microsoft. So just put that in and you get another 20% off. So it's a great deal. Full day of training, materials, all kinds of great stuff. You'll really leave with a much better understanding, knowledge to start in the world of data science. And of course, in one day you can only do so much, but it will definitely be a good kickstart. So at the lower bottom of the screen, I should say, there's a link. That's where you can find this slideshow, all the slides for this on GitHub. So keep an eye on that while I talk. But this is an introduction to RStudio. So I'm going to start by talking about what is an integrated development environment, better known as IDE. And what is RStudio? I'll give you a hint. It's an IDE. So talk about that a little bit. Features of RStudio, which make it particularly a great platform for working with R. We'll look at installing RStudio. We're going to actually walk through it. Going to give you a guided tour. So I'm going to give you a nice walk around RStudio. I've never seen anyone actually do this, so I hope it's you find it useful. But RStudio is just loaded with goodies, lots of good stuff in there that I think it's amazing how much they can put in, and I keep discovering things myself all the time, so I'll try to cover the more important things. I'll mention what other IDEs are out there. In particular, Microsoft Visual Studio is a very good option as well. And finally, we'll do a nice little review. So I hope you got the GitHub link there. Again, you can Google that if you have to or something, or come back to this, but let's move on. So really the goal of an IDE is, in most scripting languages such as Python or PowerShell or Perl, you have what's called a console. So it's, again, or Bash for that matter. You know, if you've used the Linux prompts, you come up to a prompt, you type something in, it executes a statement immediately, and that actually is a console. So you type something in, it executes it, that's a console. But sometimes you want to write long scripts. You want to do something that's going to take more than just 1 or 2 lines of code, and you want to save it into a program. When you do that, you're going to start needing more and more, depending how long it is. You're going to want more advanced text editing features and other things that make it easier to develop and debug code. And that's where an IDE, Integrated Development Environment, comes in. The IDE really integrates 2 things, a text editor and some sort of compiler or language, such as a console like R or Python, those kind of things. Again, it usually has really, a good IDE will have nice text editing features and language-specific features such as coloring the code a certain way so different statements come up in different colors, makes it easier to see things, and just different things that make it, again, easier to work with the language and write things, usually debuggers and things, and the ability to immediately execute code within the IDE itself. Now, RStudio has all these features and more. So it has an advanced text editor specifically designed for R, as integration with the maintainers of the R language called the Comprehensive R Archive Network. So they're the ones that maintain all the releases of R. They test it, etc., make sure it's right before it gets released. They also are the maintainers of many extensions to R called packages. So CRAN is really key, and nice thing with RStudio is, well, I'll show you how it integrates really nicely with the CRAN repository. RStudio is very customizable, so we can make it work the way we like. We have, it has built-in tools to help in development, and it supports extensions to R in an integrated way. We'll see that as well. RStudio, the company that writes RStudio, it is free. There are paid versions, but the one that we'll look at is a free one that does everything we'll need. And since RStudio, many of the employees for RStudio are data scientists who have written famous, really popular packages such as ggplot2 and dplyr and Shiny, and these things are really popular and heavily used in the R community. So not surprisingly, RStudio, the people, since they're the ones that really wrote these packages, which are open source and free, have really nice integration features right in within RStudio for them. Now, I will point out that RStudio tends to be more targeted towards the data scientist, the data analyst. And we'll look at, when I get into the RStudio, I'll kind of explain that, what I mean by that a little more. But the idea is, it's much more analytical. It's more playing around the data. You don't know what you're going to find necessarily. You don't know what issues you're going to run into. And it may take you many times going in and massaging data and cleaning things up and then saving intermediate result sets before you get to something you can actually use, if you ever get to that. Which is unlike a programmer's model where you get requirements, you know what you need to do, you go A, B, C, you write your script, you test it, and you're done. It's not very iterative, it's not very playing around because you know what the goal is. Typically in programming, somebody has asked you to do X and it needs to accomplish a specific goal. Data analysis and data science is much more creative. It's more opportunity based. What can we do? And so it has to have a very different path for that kind of model. All right, so let's go in now, and I'm going to use this link here to go to RStudio and install the product so we can get going here. So I'm going to just click on the link. And you'll get to this page, which you can see has many different versions of RStudio available. We're going to use the Windows, but if you're doing a Mac, there's a version for Mac, and of course several versions of Linux. So pick whatever you like. You can also use what they call the zip or tarballs if you want to build and compile it yourself. But I'm lazy, and I'm going to go for the easiest way. So I'm going to pick using the Windows version. I'm going to install that. And the nice thing with the Windows version is it's a binary install. You can see in this my Mozilla here, I believe, it's bringing the file down now. Actually, no, I'm actually in Chrome. Kind of pop around there. I'm going to say show in folder. And you can see there's RStudio. I've been reinstalling this quite a bit, so this will be like the third or fourth time today. Oh, and notice I'm running RStudio, so I'm going to have to close that out. I'm going to say don't save. So it did give me that. Let me run that again. Say next. Now my recommendation, just take all the defaults if at all possible. I'm just going to go through. It's going to put it in a folder called RStudio, so no surprises there. And it's pretty quick install, which is nice. It's one of the nice things about it. It doesn't take hours to install, a few minutes, as you can see here. And we're just going to let it take all the defaults that are available in there. And to try to, cut it out here. So we'll say finish. And what we will find is if we go to Windows, it's under the R folder, which is the default folder it wants to put under here. We can see we have an RStudio folder, so under the R marker, I guess I should say, we can now start RStudio. That's all there is to it. It remembered what scripts I had running, so I'm going to close these out for a minute. Close everything out. Don't save here. And I don't have anything running, so the first thing I have is the console. Now let me just create a script. I'm going to use a plus sign, and this is the way I can create a script. And notice there's many different types of files I can create. Nice feature of RStudio is it has a lot of flexibility. And I'll talk about those in a minute, but I'm just going to say RScript. And so I have a tab, and this is where I can type whatever I want. So if I want to do a comment, of course, it's a pound in R, my script. Let me pop down to the bottom, though. So the console, and it's labeled console, makes it easier for us, is where our programs will run. Every line in the script just gets sent to the console, it executes, and the next line gets sent until it finishes. But we can also type in directly in the console something like ls. ls is a little bit Linuxy like because it's saying show me things, but not in the file system, show me what's in memory, and there's really nothing there yet. But if I said, x equals 66 and then did ls, it shows me now that there's something in memory called x. And if I do something interesting here, if I just say ls by itself, it actually gives me the code for ls, because this is, again, open source, so we can actually see the code for the ls command. So that's what's going on. Anything that I do in the console automatically executes immediately, and then continue on. I can do whatever I want down here, which is really handy. If I can do Control L, it'll clean out the console. So let me start creating a script above. So I'll do something here. I'll say, by the way, let me point over here to the environment. Notice we created x, and in the upper right-hand corner, you can see that variable is showing x66. So we'll say y equal, nice little, let's try it again, y equal, we'll say 1 to 10. So it's going to just generate a sequence of numbers. I'll say z equal, and I'll just put in my name. And I can do something like, I want it to print out y, and then I want it to print out z. Now I could use something like the print statement and do the old hello world or something silly. And that will print, but by default, of course, R will automatically output to the console anyway. So if I want to just run this, I have these options on the upper right-hand side. And source says run everything, run the entire script. So it ran everything through. And notice it does it two ways I can source. If I source directly, it will only output the things that I specifically tell it to output. So those are the only things it will display in the console. But if I want it to display all the lines of code, which would mean where I'm assigning values as well, and for that matter, even my comment, then I want to go here, and I can say with echo. So Control-Shift-Enter will do the echo. So I can do a key combination to do the same thing, or I can go to the menu here. But Control-Shift-Enter will run the entire script and echo all the lines back, whereas Control-Shift-S will only output things. It'll run the script, but it will only output things that are specifically told to go to the console. Let me Control-L, clear that out. And let's do Control-Shift-Enter this time, I believe it is. And what you'll notice there is it shows each line, even my comment, and then where I'm outputting things, it shows me the output. So it's kind of a handy thing there. So we have either way. Now if I go to the left here, this will pop up just a separate window. I can save it by clicking on the diskette, and I can say just save that under whatever I want to call it. And if I want to, every time I save, if I check this off, every time I save it, it executes the script as well. So it's not just saving. So it's kind of a handy shortcut. Got some really nice search features. So if this was a long script and I'm looking for certain things, I got all kinds of flexibility on how I can search for things. So that's a really nice feature. Now this little magic wand has all kinds of things. Code completion, better known in Windows world as IntelliSense. So I can look for things that will start to prompt things for me as I type, and we'll see more of that. But that allows me to sort of find things, and then it will help me complete the code. It's prompting me and kind of giving like a little wizard of help, which is nice. I can also do things like go to help. So if I, for instance, here highlight this and then go and say go to help, and again I can just press F1, You notice in the right hand side under the help window, you can see now it's giving help related to the print function. So that's really any feature. So very rich stuff here. I can do something really kind of cool here, which is highlight some code and then say extract it to a function. It says, what do you want to call it? I'll call it my function. And notice that it just took the code I asked for and it formatted it as a function. This is how I would create a function called my function in R. So it's really handy that it does that. Now, like at most languages, the function won't run unless I call it specifically. So I'd have to say call my function type thing. All right, I'm going to do edit back off on that. Undo, so I can do the undo. Edit, undo, get back to my original code. But just play around here. I encourage you to explore. There's reflowing and diagnostics and all kinds of great stuff you can do here. This allows us to get some sort of report statistics. I'm not going to worry too much about that. And if I want to run single statements, I can just highlight a single statement and click on run, and that'll run just that statement. Or, and if you highlight over, you notice a little IntelliSense, a little tooltip comes up and tells you Control Enter will do the same thing. So I can just highlight that, hit Control Enter, and it runs the statement. Or I can select multiple lines and it will run whatever's highlighted, it will execute. Again, keep your eye on the right hand side because you notice the environment's filling up. Every variable I create, every object gets tabulated, gets included in that environment. And that's one of the things that I was talking about earlier, I was alluding to. RStudio is really designed to give you transparency into what you're doing. So it's going to show you all of your variables, all of your objects. Everything's right there on the surface. It's giving you many windows. So if it looks a little bit confusing to see so much provided, once you get used to it, it's kind of like the controls to an airplane. The pilot understands what they're looking at. It's all useful. There's no waste. Everything there is helpful. So I'll talk more about this environment, but you can see on this environment tab, everything we're doing is there, which is nice. We can see the values. We can see what's going on. All right, so let me start to pop up to the, and of course I can create another script if I want and say another R script and becomes just another tab. Now a handy thing here, now let's start to look at the menu here. So we have a toolbar menu, which is nothing surprising. We can do add-ins. We have all kinds of things. We can arrange windows and zoom around and all kinds of stuff here. We can save multiple files. So we get a lot of that stuff we typically see at a toolbar menu, but anything can also be accessed by the file menu. So if you're getting lost and you can't find things, typically you can find what you want in the file menu. Many of the code kind of things we saw, like executing lines of code, single lines, or the entire thing, scripting, it's all there. So we can do a lot of things this way. So if you're not sure where to find things, typically you're going to get used to more the key shortcuts, and that's kind of more helpful because you can zoom around more and get more productive. But if you can, and I sometimes can't remember certain things if I don't use it much, I'll often go up here and just try to find what I need. A lot of things to manage the session. So when you start RStudio, you're in what's called a session. And one of the nice things is everything you see on the right, all that stuff that's in memory is called session state, or it's called your workspace. And you can save your workspace to a file. And for instance, here I can say, okay, save my workspace, and it just asks me, what do I want to save it as? So I can just save it to a file. I can then reload it later. Now when you exit RStudio, it's going to ask you, do you want to save your data? And it will be under our data. And next time you come in, it automatically loads it. So it's a kind of a cool feature. So let me actually do that for a minute. So notice it's saying, do you want to save this? I'll say, sure. Let me go back in. I have it on the taskbar at the bottom, so I'm taking a shortcut to get in. But notice it restored back all the things in memory. So I might have been working on a data set that took me a long time to create, and I have to go home, it's late in the day. I can just exit and save it, and then come back and bring it in. Or I can use the session and tell it to save the workspace specifically, and I can give it a name, like cancer research data, or forecast modeling, or whatever it is, and save it under that, and bring that in specifically. So I could clear out everything else and then focus on that, then save it again. So that workspace, that session state memory is really helpful that it does that. And again, it's very nicely integrated into everything we're doing here. So that's really helpful. Nice debugging features. So if you need to do debugging, you've got that here. The profiler is really designed to help you figure out where's your script spending most of its time. And the idea there is if it's really taking a long time to run things, and R can get bogged down sometimes, the profiler will help you figure out where is it spending its time so you can optimize that and speed things up. Now when we get to tools, here's a couple of things I want to show you that I really like. You do have things like version control. But here's one of my favorite features. I can just click here, install packages. Packages in R are really the most critical feature probably of anything because it's how it gets extended to do more things. Packages just add really more statements or functions onto the R language for us, but you can do so much because there's so many amazing packages out there that give you great visualizations. There's one called Shiny that lets you write complete web applications and interactive things on the internet. So it's really good stuff. And what I love about this is when I go to install packages, it automatically knows where CRAN is. I don't have to tell it. So I don't have to tell it where I'm looking to install packages from. And most packages, not all, but most are available on CRAN. So that's going to get me a big jump start. And I can look for something like GG, say plot2, and I can find it and say, oh, I want to install that. Or I can install pretty much anything I want. So let's say I want to just install something like GG alt. I'm not even sure what that is. Notice also, though, it's going to install dependencies. That's checked off. Sometimes one package will build off other packages, and those may also have packages. And it would be painful if I had to know what all those dependencies were and then install a package only to have it complain that there's something missing. So that will take care of that. And now I can say install this GG alt. And notice that it's automatically went out and you sort of the status bar pop up and it installed everything. I think that's very cool because I did nothing. If you've used things like Python, it's great, but it can be a little trickier because you have to use a package manager and you have to oftentimes figure out where you're going to get something from, and there's many places you can get it from. But in R, it's kind of idiot proof for someone like me, so I love that because I can just get what I need and continue on. So that's one thing I really like. The other thing I want to point out is global options. People like to tailor environments, IDEs especially. So if you like dark backgrounds and bright color codes and things, you can go all over here and change your fonts and change your layouts and do whatever you really want to tailor this to your needs. So have fun with that and just make it whatever you want to do with it because it's got a lot of flexibility in that way. Now, of course, if you're new to R, and you probably are if you're doing RStudio for the first time, you can get R help here by just going help R. And notice there's a help tab to the right. And that by doing the help from the menu, it's giving us sort of the table of contents for R. And there's all kinds of help on the R language in here. And I can go into about RStudio. I can do get docs. And docs will actually trigger this and brings me to the RStudio site with all these kinds of documentation. So a lot of good stuff there. And then, of course, you can do add-ins and things. So I think we've kind of covered the upper left quadrant. We've talked about the console. So let's move to the right side now. So we're talking about the environment, and this is really cool. And on the environment tab, again, the thing is, it shows you everything transparently in your environment, which is really handy. And I can save things. I can even import data sets. And so from here, I get a little wizard, and I say, gee, I want to import from Excel. And notice it gives me a nice utility, a wizard, to kind of walk through importing data. So I love stuff like that. I like things that make my life easier. Lots of good stuff, even importing from SAS and Strata and all different types of data. And you can clean it up by just clicking on the broom. History will show us all of the different history we've entered. This is our history of commands. And by the way, if I go to the console, I can do up arrow and down arrow as I would in like a Linux prompt, and it will go through commands that have been entered. But one thing I can do, for instance, I say, gee, I want to bring back that statement. I can go here, click on this, and say to source, and notice it just populated the window with the statement I had entered before. So I've entered some really long command and I want to bring it back, and it may not have been in the script. I could have done it directly. That's one way I can bring back that command easily and go in and do things. I could also say go to the console, and then it puts it to the console. There's a lot of good stuff there. This is kind of a new thing. I haven't played with it yet, but it's connections. So from here I can use ODBC or Spark. So ODBC to connect to like things like SQL Server sources or MySQL or something, and Spark is of course to connect to a Spark cluster. So it's pretty cool. I'm going to have to explore that. That's like one of the newest things apparently in RStudio. And now let's go back to the lower right side. And this is one of my favorite things too, is the Files tab. Kind of a nifty thing. Not many IDEs have this. I love it because I can just click, for instance, I say I want to look at this script, and notice it loaded it in for me. I can also do all kinds of stuff. I can rename files, copy them, remove them by using the More tab. Notice rename here. I can delete. So I can really manage my files and never have to exit into the file system or navigate around. I can just bring things in directly, which is really handy. When I do plots, so let me try doing a little plot here. Plot, we'll say rnorm, and we'll say 1, we just say 15. Control Enter. And that just gives you a little plot here. But so the plot tab will show up your plots. And if you have many, you can step backwards and forwards through them. So it's kind of handy that way. You have a little export thing, so I can save it as an image or a PDF. I can copy it to the clipboard. I can zoom, get a bigger view of it. All kinds of stuff here. So that's really kind of a nice feature as well. There's even something where if you can create entire slide presentations using something up here called Markdown, and then another tab will be opened up that will actually allow us to look at the slides and see what's going on there. So like slide presentation, so that's cool. Now the package tab allows us to see all the packages that we have downloaded and installed. So a lot of these come when you install R itself, but some are not available immediately in R, like ggplot2. So you can install those as I showed you by going from the menu, or there's actually, when I do something, I want to show you something here. When I use the menu option, it just generated this statement, install.packages, and then in quotes, the name of the package. Again, excuse me, R knows where CRAN is, and it will automatically install packages that easily. Again, I love the simplicity. Maybe there's some limitations to having one only place where R is maintained, but I gotta love the simplicity. I know where it is, and I don't have to start searching for things. So I really like that. So again, if I want to bring in a new package that I have installed, but it's not currently available to me because I have to load it, I can just go over here and, for instance, click it, and it generated this statement here, library, and brings in the package to make it available. If I want to get rid of it, I just unclick it, and it does the statement detach. Let me get rid of that statement here because that just keeps reappearing. Now I can do those statements directly, but it's nice that it has that ability. Again, you've got your help tab. You can pop around here. A lot of times when I need help, it just pops up. And certain types of files will go into the viewer. Another thing is, if I want to expand a given column, I can use this little toggle. It will shrink or expand the box. If I want to go as long as it can go with the total height, I can do that. So that works in different places. So that's kind of handy, a little navigation thing. This is for projects, so I can go in here and manage projects and things. If I want to, project is really just when I have multiple scripts that I want to use as part of a single sort of goal, or hence the project thing. It's something they all relate to each other. Okay, one thing I didn't get a chance to show, but I want to kind of get a look at. So R has, of course, built-in data sets, which I can look at using data. And you get all these nice little data sets. What I want to do is go back for a minute. And I'm going to assign one to a variable because I want to show you something called the viewer, which is built into R also, RStudio. So I'm going to say something like some data. I'm going to assign it to a built-in data set called empty cars. And let me just control enter there. When I do that, go to environment, and notice now some data has that little arrow next to it and this little box. And if I click on it, the arrow will actually give me a breakdown, like a structure. What's in that? It's called a data frame. So it's like an in-memory table. But what's really cool is I can click on this, and it gives me a little viewer, and I can sort the data. I can go in and filter data. I can do whatever I want. There's a lot of nice flexibility. It's one of the things I really think is very cool. I can also do something called edit, and I can say some data. I think sometimes I forget if it's upper. So R is case sensitive. But the little edit thing gives me a little like a crude Excel spreadsheet. I can kind of navigate around. I can actually make changes to my data here by just typing in things. It will save whatever I make the changes, but only to the variable. It's not saving it to a file or wiping out the original data set. And that's because, again, I created a variable and I just pointed this data frame into it. In R, it's one of the nice features of R. You don't have to go tracking down. Just installing R itself will give you a bunch of data files and data frames, they call them, in-memory tables that you can play with. So it's a really nice feature. All right, I think we've covered the basics of RStudio, but I do want to point to, play around with these things because it's just so much you can do. When you create a markdown, and I'm going to just let it do, and I'll create one that's called a presentation, it automatically generates templates for us, and what this lets us do is, this is designed to create really presentations. It lets us create documents, presentations, and things. So this is actually designed to create a slide presentation. And I can say here, knit allows it to turn it into what I need. So I'm going to convert this to slides, and I'll just give it a file name. And so what it did was it created the slideshow for me, and I can step through the slides. So I just kind of wanted to show some of that. It's a little choppy here. I can say, if I say open my browser, it will look a little bit better. I can step through. So the main point there is that you can use RStudio, for instance, to even do slideshow presentations, and it can integrate your R code directly. So what I like about that is, if you've got a lot of code and it's constantly being generated, it will dynamically generate it, and then you can bring it into your presentations. All right, so let's go back to the next thing. Okay, so as we pointed out, RStudio, this is the slide where you would go download RStudio and just make sure you pick the right version for you. And this is how we execute RStudio. Just go to the file where it is, the folder, and run it. And what we saw is RStudio's kind of at a glance slide. We saw that we have the editor to the upper left. Now these can be arranged. This is default layout. But you have the editor tabs to the upper left, the console to the right below that, and the right-hand side, the environment, the history, and then below that is the file, plots, packages, help, viewer, etc. So again, a lot of integration, a lot of visibility into what's going on, a lot of transparency. We did a little bit of a tour of RStudio. So some key things I want to kind of give you key takeaways. If you do install RStudio, start using it, the install packages is a really cool thing. If you start exploring options and things you can do like ggplot2, they'll say, oh, go get this package. You'll see that a lot when you look at sample code. You almost always are going to have to, at least in the beginning, go out and get new packages installed. It's very easy to do. And we saw how to create a new script just by saying new. And then we have a whole bunch of types, but we're just really looking for the script type. Nice feature we also noticed was we could use the object browser to go in. We see everything, of course, in the environment tab, but the little box will bring it up and we can see it in a filterable, sortable grid. And notice we also was able to run entire scripts by using source. Source with echo, or Control-Shift-Enter, will also echo all the statements back to the console, whereas just source will only output statements. Only output that will go to the console is things that we explicitly tell to go to the console. Or we can use run to run just selected lines. And we use the file manager to be able to open and manage files in our system. It's a handy way to load scripts easily. We saw the global options, which gives us a whole bunch of options here of how we want to work, colors, fonts, etc., how we want our IDE to look. Okay, so that was a lot to cover. There are the points here. Why RStudio? I think one reason for using RStudio is that it is by far the most popular IDE for R. Probably 80–90% of the market, I would guess, is people using RStudio. It is ideally suited to data science and data analysis, so it's really good for that. But there are other options. RTools for Visual Studio is an extension, so you install Visual Studio, then you can look for RTools for Visual Studio, and that adds extensions to Visual Studio so that you can do R development, which is a great idea if you're using multiple languages and you want to have one IDE for everything. So if you're doing Python and C# and whatever else, that's a great option. It is very feature rich. They've done an amazing job at Microsoft to add a lot of features to Visual Studio's R's features. It's pretty close to RStudio, but when it comes to really point-for-point comparison, RStudio, it's been around a long time. They got a leg up on features. So for data analysis and data science standpoint, I think RStudio still has the strength. But for multiple language support, for programming support, and any kind of integration you're looking with Microsoft products like Azure and SQL Server and things, which are many features there, then you probably want to look at Visual Studio with R. Another more popular option coming along is something called Visual Studio Code, or VS Code. And the idea behind VS Code is creating a very robust, very powerful editor that can compare with pretty much any of the editors out there that people like. But it can integrate also with different types of consoles, and so it becomes a good IDE. A lot of developers, especially in the Python and world, etc., they kind of like to use sort of generic editors like Atom or something, and then integrate in the console for Python. And so that's kind of the idea here. You can just use whatever you want. It's platform independent, which Visual Studio is not quite as platform independent. It had sort of a legacy more of being sort of Windows targeted, but VS Code is more independent that way. But of course, there's also options like using Eclipse. Some people like that, or you can use the R console itself, which when you install R gives you a sort of simple console and some text editing. So those are also options. So we talked about a lot. We talked about what is an integrated development environment. We learned that it's just really a program or platform that lets us write programs easily, helps us work with whatever language and writing programs we want to do. We talked about the features of RStudio. We learned there's a lot of features there. Encourage you to play around, explore. As I mentioned, I see new things all the time, and they're always, every time there's a new release, they add a lot of new features. So when you get beyond some of the basics, you might want to look at Shiny for web application development. You may want to look at our notebooks for very powerful sort of research documents. We did a guided tour of RStudio, and I hope that gave you some smattering of what you can do there. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't point out the other options that are available. So I did that, and I hope to cover that in more detail. I hope to do a review of our tools, Visual Studio in particular, and kind of walk through a demo of that as well. Again, please subscribe, follow, like, share. It's hard to get your word out and get people using these videos I'm doing. And the more people that get them, great. It's free. It's available. Why not just share them with your friends and all that good stuff? And I look forward to comments. I'm trying to improve on these things all the time and make it more understandable and usable for people. So look forward to anything people have to say. It's helpful, and thank you.